Over the centuries, the English countryside has provided the setting for many of the most magnificent stately homes to be found anywhere in Europe. With time, many have been destroyed, torn down, or abandoned. Some have managed to survive. This is the story behind 10 of them, 10 unique and splendid houses, behind whose doors stand many of the nation's artistic and cultural treasures, most of them still homes to the families who built them, all of them living monuments, linked by 1,000 years of English history. Bedfordshire, in the heart of England. A huge rolling parkland filled with deer to produce a constantly animated view. And like a great jewel in the landscape, a house that for over 300 years has been the family home of the Dukes of Bedford. The sheer variety of treasures at Woburn is unrivalled. This is the Long Gallery, a suitably majestic setting for one of the most famous paintings of English history, George Gower's The Armada Portrait of Queen Elizabeth I, painted in or just after the year of the Spanish Armada's defeat by Sir Francis Drake and the English fleet in 1588, 400 years ago, and portraying Elizabeth as Empress of the world with her hand casually laid on the globe. Woburn's art collection is legendary. The Reynolds Room contains 9 pictures by perhaps the best known of 18th century portrait painters, Sir Joshua Reynolds. This is Elizabeth Keppel, Marchioness of Tavistock, painted by Reynolds in 1761, wearing the dress she wore as a bridesmaid at the wedding of George III and Queen Charlotte. Nearly every one of Woburn's public rooms, spread over 3 vast floors, tells its own story. The grand staircase, which has somehow stood secure for 200 years despite having no visible means of support, each step being held in place by the one above. The state apartments. Queen Victoria stayed here. She and Prince Albert visited nearly all of the treasure houses. Charles I had stayed at Woburn in 1636 and again later in 1647. And Woburn can even claim to have invented the phenomenon of afternoon tea. In the 19th century, Duchess Anna Maria, wife of the 7th Duke, would serve tea and sandwiches here in the blue drawing room for those guests who found the time between luncheon and dinner just too long to bear. And then there's the grotto, part of the oldest section of the house, built from the ruins of the monastic abbey between 1619 and 1641. The stonework is carved to resemble seaweed and stalactites inlaid with ormer shells from the Channel Islands. But it's the dining room at Woburn, which the family still use today, which takes the breath away. This is the Canaletto room, hung with probably the finest collection of Venetian paintings by Antonio Canali in the world. The set of 24 were commissioned by the 4th Duke in the early 18th century. The Canalettos combine precise, almost photographic detail of scenes in Venice with a brilliant feeling for light. On the table, part of Woburn's fabulous collection of gold and silver. This is silver gilt, solid silver layered with a gold surface. and some of it dates back to the 17th century. The house is now lived in by the heir to the Dukedom of Bedford, the Marquis of Tavistock, whose interest in the day-to-day running of the house and estate has grown gradually over the years. For a young man, the prospect of living the rest of your life in this great edifice seems to have been rather forbidding.
In the beginning, I was terrified to live here, but it slowly involves you around everything, and the game park, everything. It all becomes part of one, and therefore every year I get more used to living here than the previous year. It's a daft thing to say, but in the end we came to love it.
Lord Tavistock's favourite room at Woburn is not, as you might expect, the Reynolds or the Canaletto, but the drawing room, set aside in honour of his great-grandmother Mary, known as the Flying Duchess, who made the headlines of the day by making long flights to South Africa and India. Her extraordinary life ended in 1937, when, at the age of 72, flying over the Fens, she crashed. Close by, the racing room, filled with trophies from the success of the Bedford colours on the racetrack, taking pride of place the present Lady Tavistock's famous brood mare, Mrs. Moss, who's now become almost as well known as her illustrious predecessors.
The Bedford family had a tremendous connection with the turf. Admiral Rouse, who was one of the most influential people in the history of racing, was their advisor. In fact, they won the Derby 3 times and the Oaks 3 times as well. And in 1965, we bought our first foal. My husband thought I was mad. And he said, "Why are you doing it?" And I said, "Because I think it'd be lovely, after your colours haven't been registered for over 100 years, to make them as famous as they were." And we were very lucky, and we bought a mare called Mrs. Moss for 2,100 guineas. And she's produced us 10 winners from 15 foals. In fact, her last 2 foals haven't even run yet. Because Mrs. Moss had really changed our lives so much and created, well, a dynasty, we thought it would be lovely to have a life-size bronze done of her. So Philip Blacker did it last year, and he did the statue here with her, so it really is exactly like her, down even to her small foot. And I think really this is such an incredibly grand and elegant house, and to have the statue looking at it and the peace of the lake behind really makes a wonderful setting.